The Notebook of Doom. Pop the Bumpy Mummy. Chapter 1, Junk Mail. Alexander Bopp was almost home when he heard the screaming. It was coming from his house. He ran to his yard. His dad was on the front porch, twisting and shouting. "Dad," he yelled. Alexander had seen lots of weird things since moving to Sturmont. Weird things like monsters. He'd battled balloon goons, shadow smashers, tunnel fish, and other creepy creatures. Alexander looked from the porch to the trees to the driveway. No monsters. Oh, wait, Dad's not under attack, he thought. He's dancing. Good news, Al. His dad said. It's finally here. Alexander's dad boogied into the house. Alexander followed, dropping his backpack by the door. What's here, Dad? His dad spun around, holding a padded envelope. The Reflecto 900 is here, he said. He ripped open the envelope and pulled out a golden wand. It's the perfect dental tool. Reflecto 900. Built-in light. Fog-proof mirror. Solid gold. Alexander gave his dad a funny look. Geez, Al, his dad said. If you were a dentist, you'd be going nuts about this mirror. He polished the Reflecto 900 on his sleeve. Let's see if your package is any better. I have a package? Asked Alexander. You sure do, his dad said. Although it doesn't say who it's from. He handed Alexander a rainbow-striped box. It was large, but very light. It looks like a birthday present, said Alexander's dad. It can't be, said Alexander. My birthday isn't until February 29th. That's months away. He tore into the box. Look at all that bubble wrap, his dad said. Whatever is in there must be good. Alexander dug around in the box. He yanked out a huge blob of bubble wrap. It's empty, he said. Check again, his dad said. You must have missed something. Alexander checked. Nope, he said. Just a bunch of bubble wrap. His shoulders slumped. Sorry, kiddo, his dad said. Alexander tossed the box aside. Why would someone send me an empty box? Tell you what, said Alexander's dad. Let's have waffles for dinner. He set the Reflecto 900 on the coffee table and walked toward the kitchen. Hey, Al, called his dad. Why don't you bring that box and bubble wrap to school tomorrow for packing day? Oh, yeah, okay, said Alexander, popping a few bubbles. Tomorrow was the last day of school. And Sturmont Elementary was getting ready to move into a brand new building. The principal had asked students to donate boxes. Alexander looked over at the empty box. Then he dropped the bubble wrap on the coffee table and headed to the kitchen. Chapter 2, Packing Day. Honk honk HOONNNNNNK. Alexander knew that honk. It was the old "we're going to be late for school if you don't get down here right now" honk. Coming, Dad, he shouted. He grabbed his box, ran outside, and hopped in the car. Did you bring the bubble wrap, too? Asked Alexander's dad. No, I couldn't find it, said Alexander. Well, I'll be flossed, said Alexander's dad. I can't find my Reflecto 900 either. You left it on the coffee table last night, said Alexander. I looked there, said his dad, but no luck. Alexander pulled his spelling book out of his backpack. A piece of paper fell to the seat. Pajama party at the Sturmont Museum Saturday night sleepover. See the ruby scorpion and the bumpy mummy. Bring your sleeping bag. Chaperones, asterisk Mr. Plunkett, Mr. Horsley, asterisk Dr. Bopp. Coupon, 10% off any paperweight at the gift shop. Oh, yeah, Dad. The museum sleepover is tomorrow night, said Alexander. I know, his dad grinned. We're going to have a blast. Alexander opened the spelling book. He had tucked an old notebook inside. SSMP Doom. SSMP Sadface Super Secret Monster Patrol. Creepy Skull. Full of monster drawings. The notebook belonged to the Super Secret Monster Patrol. It was their job to keep Stermont safe from monsters. Alexander was one of the club's 3 members. He flipped the notebook open. Purple Slur PR, 2 arms. 2 legs. 39 tongues. Habitat, under the dinner table. Peter Picker piped a pack, Peeper Piper packed a peep, Pickle Peter Pepede, these guys hate tongue twisters. Diet, purple slurpers love to lick chocolate icing and melted popsicles off of people's faces. Behavior, drooling slobbering stamp collecting. Warning! Scrub your face at least once a week, or you might get licked. We're here, said his dad. Alexander closed the notebook as his dad pulled into the school parking lot. The car stopped beside a sign. Students and teachers were busy loading boxes into a moving truck. Happy packing day, Al, said his dad. See you after school. Thanks, Dad, said Alexander. He hopped out of the car with his big striped box and plunk. Walked into someone carrying another big striped box. Salamander, she said. Salamander was Alexander's nickname. His 2 friends in the SSMP called him that. And he had just crashed into one of them. Hi, Nikki, he said. Hey. Your box looks just like mine. Did yours come in the mail yesterday, too? She asked. Yes, said Alexander. But mine was empty. Except for some bubble wrap. Same here, said Nikki. Suddenly, they heard an angry growl. A wall of cardboard boxes started shaking. Then K.A. bash! It came crashing down. Ha! Scared you, weenies, said a spiky-haired kid. It was Rip Bonkowski, the 3rd and loudest member of the SSMP. Good one, Rip, Alexander said. Hey, look, said Rip. Our boxes are triplets. He held up another striped box. Weird, said Alexander. 3 matching boxes? More than 3, said Nikki. She pointed to a sign that said Box Drop OFF. Students were lined up, all carrying striped boxes. Alexander counted. 13, 14, 15, 16 matching boxes, he said. That's super strange. Yeah, so spooky, said Rip, rolling his eyes. Let's dump our boxes and get to class. Chapter 3, Last Class. Alexander grabbed the cold, metal handle of the cold, metal door to his cold, metal classroom. Then he paused. You guys, he said. Today is our last day in the morgue. Finally, said Rip. Our last day in the room where they used to freeze dead people. Next fall, we'll go to an actual school, said Nikki, instead of an old hospital. Alexander smiled as he yanked open the door one last time. The room was full of half-packed boxes. In the middle of the boxes sat Mr. Plunkett, a teacher with rainbow suspenders and a bushy mustache. Grab a seat, students, said Mr. Plunkett. If you can find one. Alexander, Rip, and Nikki sat among the boxes. Mr. Plunkett stood on a box so he could see everyone. Our museum sleepover is tomorrow night, he said. So today's lesson will be about our town's greatest treasure, the ruby scorpion. Alexander watched his classmates' faces light up. He raised his hand. Mr. Plunkett? What's a ruby scorpion? Oh, right. You're kind of new to Stermont, said Mr. Plunkett, hopping down from the box. I've got a super cool film strip about the ruby scorpion. I'll just unpack my projector and show you. He opened a large, wooden crate. Huh, said Mr. Plunkett. He dug into the crate, tossing aside some bubble wrap. My projector is gone. Mr. Plunkett scratched his mustache. Oh, well, he said. I'll draw the ruby scorpion for you. Mr. Plunkett drew a mean-looking creature on the whiteboard. It had sharp claws and an even sharper tail. It's a red gem that looks like this, he said. Nikki raised her hand. How much is it worth? She asked. Gazillions of dollars, said Mr. Plunkett. Pip pop. Okay, very funny. Mr. Plunkett turned back to the class. Who's playing with my bubble wrap? Alexander looked around. The bubble wrap was nowhere to be seen. My projector and the bubble wrap are both gone, said Mr. Plunkett. He looked at Rip. What? Said Rip. Why does everyone look at me when stuff happens? Well, those things didn't just walk away, said Mr. Plunkett. He capped his marker. Fine. Let's move on to math. Alexander wrote a quick note. He slid it over to Rip and Nikki. My dad's fancy mirror disappeared this morning just like Mr. Plunkett's projector. Missing stuff plus weird striped boxes monster? Rip shook his head as he scribbled on the note. He passed it back. Salamander equals crazy x10. Chapter 4, Mummy's the word. A tall, frowning mummy guarded the entrance to the cafeteria. Most students walked right on by. But not Alexander. He stepped up for a closer look. The mummy was a cardboard cutout. It held the lunch menu. The bumpy mummy. I'll be waiting for Emmer Plunkett's class at the Sturmont Museum tomorrow. Menu. Monday, mummy wrap. Tuesday, Southwest mummy wrap. Same as above plus peppers. Wednesday, boneless mummy wrap. Thursday, chunky mummy wrap. Friday, 5,000-year old mummy wrap. Kidding. It's only 4 days old. Alexander skipped the lunch line. He found Rip and Nikki at their usual table. Their plates were piled high with slimy yellow strips. Rip made gagging sounds. Do you think the food will be less barfy at our new school? He asked. We can only hope, Nikki said. Bloop. BLAP. She dumped a whole jar of salsa on her plate. She mixed it up until her plate was a red, gloppy mess. Then she snarfed it down. Rip dropped his fork. You really do eat like monster, he said. Thank you, Rip. Nikki smiled. She was a monster, a good monster called a jampire. Jampires have fangs. They eat anything red and juicy. They can see in the dark. They sunburn easily. Alexander opened his lunchbox. Bob Dentistry. Orange, you glad it's the last day of school? XOXO Dad. Alexander munched an orange slice as he looked back at the fake mummy. So, what's the deal with the bumpy mummy? He asked. Relax, Salamander, said Rip. The bumpy mummy is just a plain, old museum mummy. But it's got these dead, empty eyes, said Nikki. And it's covered in strange little bumps. Alexander became covered in strange little bumps. Goose bumps. And there's this story, said Nikki, that the bumpy mummy will come alive if steals the ruby scorpion. But that's dash. Attention, students. Alexander jumped. Principal Vanderpan stood behind him, shouting. We've already packed our loudspeaker. So must speak loudly, she spoke loudly. Since today is packing day, you will spend the rest of the afternoon packing up our school. Report the loading dock in 5 minutes. Rip groaned. No, this is good, said Alexander. This will give us a chance to learn more about those striped boxes. Chapter 5, Boxed In. The loading dock was crowded. Students swarmed around, packing and stacking boxes. This place is like a beehive, said Nikki. More like a make kids do all the work hive, said Rip. Look, said Nikki. More striped boxes. They're everywhere. I'm telling you, said Alexander. These boxes must have something to do with monsters. Or the boxes are monsters. Rip joked. Said Alexander. There's only one box monster in the notebook. He flipped it open to show his friends. Yakin the box. Dink-a-doo-da-deedle-dee-doo. Boing. Rawr. Chomp. Sproing. Yaks in the box get hungry when they hear pop goes the weasel. Habitat, a polka dot wind-up box. Diet, ladies. Gentlemen. Children of all ages. Behavior, this beast may wear a goofy hat, but it does not clown around. Warning, don't turn the crank. Our boxes can't be yaks in the box, said Nikki. Ours are striped. If we could just figure out where these boxes came from, said Alexander. Let's ask that walking pile of boxes, said Rip. Ask me what, said the walking pile of boxes. Alexander looked closer. A shock of white hair stuck up from behind the stack of boxes. Hey, Mr. Horsley, said Alexander. What's the deal with these striped boxes? Mr. Horsley was the school secretary, bus driver, nurse, gym coach, and janitor. He also used to be a member of the SSMP. Well, Mr. Horsley leaned down. Someone mailed a box to every kid in Sturmont, he said. And they were all empty, except for PPPIP. Pip. Pop pop. Eep. Mr. Horsley threw his boxes and curled up on the ground. Boxes crashed around him. One landed upside down, covering him like a turtle. Pop. 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 Rip stood nearby, twisting a sheet of bubble wrap. Oops, he said. I forgot Horsley is such a, scaredy turtle. Alexander tapped Mr. Horsley's shell. Did monsters send us these boxes? Mr. Horsley stuck his neck out. Monsters? I don't know and I don't want to know, he said. I've got my own problems. I had packed Miss Vanderpant's telescope, but it's missing and my dustpan is gone, too. He shuffled off more missing stuff, said Rip. Maybe you're not crazy, Salamander. Yeah, your dad's mirror, Mr. Plunkett's projector, and now this, said Nikki. Something is up. I agree, said Alexander, grabbing one of Mr. Horsley's boxes. We've just unpacked a big clue. Chapter 6, Hands Off. The walk home from school was slower than usual. Phew, said Nikki. I bet we packed 20,000 things. What a lame last day of school, said Rip. A few minutes later, they stopped in front of Alexander's house. All right, guys, said Alexander. Let's meet at SSMP headquarters first thing tomorrow. We'll have all day to talk about weird boxes and missing stuff before the sleepover. Sounds good, said Nikki. Later, mumbled Rip. Alexander headed inside and gasped. The living room had been turned upside down. His dad popped up from behind an overturned armchair. Hi, Al, he said. The room was a jumble of couch cushions. Comic books, umbrellas, lamps, and Captain Cuspid action figures. I've searched every inch of this room, said Alexander's dad. The Reflecto 900 is gone. Crickle! What was that? Asked Alexander. Alexander's dad was rooting around under an end table. Huh? I didn't hear anything. Crickle, crickle. Alexander heard the noise again. It sounded like someone crinkling a bag of chips. And it was coming from upstairs. He tiptoed up the steps, listening for the sound. Crickle! Is someone in our bathroom? Alexander thought. He slowly pushed open the door. Creak! A wedge of light cut into the dark bathroom. He stepped inside. The room was silent. But then crickle! Crickle! The shower curtain twitched. Alexander threw open the shower curtain. Something small and shiny was skittering around the tub like a crab. A crawling hand. It was grayish-white and crinkly. Ack! Alexander jumped back. The hand climbed up the shower curtain. It was holding something golden, his dad's mirror. Hey, said Alexander. Give that back. The hand jumped to the windowsill. It used the Reflecto 900 to pry open the window. Then it hopped out. Alexander rushed to the window. He could see everything in his yard, a tree, his bike, a bird bath. But no crawling hand. He gasped someone was behind the tree. A tall, grayish-white, shiny figure. Covered in strange little bumps. The figure looked up at Alexander. Then it turned and ran down the street. Alexander's mouth fell open. The Bumpy Mummy? Chapter 7, A Real Steal. The next morning, Alexander wolfed down his cereal. He was out the door before his spoon hit the table. He ran through the woods behind his house to an old caboose, the SSMP headquarters. Rip and Nicky were inside, playing a heated game of tic-tac-tunnel fish. You guys, said Alexander, the Bumpy Mummy is alive. I saw it last night. Rip and Nicky looked at each other. Rip snorted. Come on, Salamander. Yes, I already told you the Bumpy Mummy is just a bag of bones at the museum. No, Rip. I really saw it, said Alexander. I mean, I'm pretty sure. It was dark out, and I was kind of far away. But I saw this shiny person, all dressed in white. That could have been anyone, said Rip. Like a nurse. Or a chef. Or a fencing coach. Not necessarily a monster. But it had bumps all over, said Alexander. And besides, even if I am wrong about the mummy, I saw something else, a crawling hand. In my bathtub. A monster hand, said Rip. Now you're talking. And it had my dad's golden mirror, said Alexander. It did? Nicky said. What if that hand monster stole the other missing stuff, too? Like the projector. And the telescope. She looked at her friends. It sounds like our new hand monster is a thief. Did you find any hand monsters in the notebook? Asked Rip. Yeah, said Alexander. Sort of. He opened the monster notebook to a wrinkled-up page. Hitten Mitten. They look cute, but they pack a punch. Bow wow. Hitten Mittens run when they see an art scarf. Habitat, glove compartments. Diet, lint, fuzz, fur balls. Behavior, these warm, fuzzy mittens turn into boxing gloves as soon as you put them on. Then, BAM. Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. Warning. Hitten mittens work in pairs. If you separate them, they become powerless. Alexander closed the notebook. The thing I saw wasn't a mitten, it was a hand, with fingers, he said. All right. Let's spring into action, said Rip. So, what should we do? Let's see if anything else is missing, said Alexander. Go home and snoop around for missing stuff. Then we'll compare notes tonight at the sleepover. Sounds like a plan, said Nicky. See you on the bus. And watch out for hand monsters. The three friends gave one another a high 15, high 5 times 3. Then they ran home to start snooping. Chapter 8, Round and Round. The sky was as dark as the blacktop in the school parking lot. The only stars out that night were on Alexander's pajama bottoms. Nice pants, weenie, said Rip. Thanks, said Alexander, giving Rip the stink eye. The boys got in line behind Nicky to board the school bus. I didn't see anything this afternoon, said Alexander. No crawling hands. No mummies and no more missing stuff. Well, said Rip, during dinner, my mom said her trumpet had disappeared. And my ice skates are missing, said Nicky. PSSHHHHT. The bus door opened. Alexander's dad leaned out, waving like a beauty queen. Howdy, kiddos, he said. I'm Dr. Bop, Alexander's dad. Everyone in line gave Alexander a look. At least, that's how it felt to him. The students climbed on the bus. Mr. Horsley started the engine as Mr. Plunkett took attendance. Alexander plopped down beside Rip and Nicky. Your dad is so cute, said Nicky. And his PJs match yours, star pants, said Rip. Yeah, said Alexander. The three friends looked out the window as the bus left the parking lot. Yikes, said Nicky. That old hospital is really falling apart. The bus drove along. It passed a brand new building. Look at our new school, said Alexander. It's so clean and perfect, said Nicky. And not smashed up by monsters, said Rip. At least, not yet. It's song time. Alexander's dad called out from up front. Here's one I learned at dental school. He took a big breath. The drills, on the teeth, go round and round. The drills, Alexander tried to meld into his seat. It didn't work. Chapter 9, The Ruby Scorpion. After 11 verses of the drills on the teeth, the bus finally came to a stop. We're here, said Mr. Plunkett. Grab your gear and head inside. The Stermont Museum looked like a cross between a bank and a haunted house. Alexander, Rip, and Nicky followed their classmates into the lobby. The room was big, cold, and dark. A green glow came from an enormous clock on the second floor. Colorful banners hung everywhere. Okay, said Mr. Plunkett. Put your sleeping bags over by the gift shop next to that mean-looking soldier statue. The statue's head slowly turned to face the group. Everyone gasped. Actually, said the statue. I am not a statue. I am a guard. She flashed a badge. Ms. Sargent, Museum Guard. Ms. Sargent looked Mr. Plunkett up and down. My job is to protect Stermont's greatest treasures and to make sure there's no funny business tonight. She glared at Mr. Plunkett's gopher slippers. Funny business? Me? Never, said Mr. Plunkett. And with Dr. Bop and Mr. Horsley here, wait. He looked around. Where is Mr. Horsley? The students stared back in silence. Oh, brother, said Mr. Plunkett. He is always wandering off. Let's just start the tour dash bong. Cuckoo. Mr. Plunkett looked up at the balcony. Like I said, let's dash. Bon bong. Cuckoo coo. Ba bong. Cuckoo, CKOO. Bon bong. Cuckoo coo. The students covered their ears. What you're hearing is the world's second largest cuckoo clock, Ms. Sargent said. It's 3 stories tall. You'll notice dash. Clocks schmocks, yelled Rip. Let's see the ruby scorpion. Ms. Sargent gave Rip a look that could wilt lettuce. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. Follow me. She led the group to a round room. The room was empty except for a small, glass dome holding the scorpion-shaped red gem. Its eyes seemed to move in the twinkling light. Ooh-hoo, everyone said. They squeezed in for a closer look. Alexander got separated from Rip and Nicky. Ugh, he thought. The scorpion's cool and all, but there's no need to shove. Has anyone ever stolen the ruby scorpion? Asked Alexander's dad. Impossible, said Ms. Sargent. It's protected by my special security system. She turned off the lights. Thin beams of red light crisscrossed on all sides of the ruby scorpion. To steal the ruby, someone would have to get around all 12 of these lasers. If anything touches a laser, an alarm goes off. The ruby, said Mr. Plunkett. So sparkly. Everyone stared at the gem in silence. Crickle, crickle. Alexander's eyes widened. That's the same crinkling sound I heard last night. Crickle! The sound was coming from the lobby. Alexander tried to wave to Rip and Nicky. But like everyone else, they were dazzled by the scorpion. Crickle, crickle. Alexander backed out of the room. He tiptoed across the lobby. There! Something shiny darted across the floor. A hand! Thought Alexander. The hand from my bathroom. The hand skittered downstairs. You're not getting away this time, Alexander whispered. He dashed down the steps. He skidded to a stop beneath a stone archway. Mummy's chamber. Alexander swallowed. Then he stepped inside. Chapter 10, Just in Case. Alexander stood in a huge stone room, the mummy's chamber. There were strange carvings on the walls. Fake torches gave off a soft, dancing light. Cold fog covered the floor. There was no sign of the hand creature. Clack! Something moved at the far end of the room. Alexander crept toward the noise. The floor felt ice cold through his footy pajamas. He came to a tall, golden box. There were snakes and beetles carved on the sides. A skull was painted on top. The mummy case, he thought. The torches flickered. The case started to shake. Then the lid popped open. Og! Alexander jumped back. Eep! Don't hurt me, screamed the pale, ghostly figure inside. Alexander stopped. He blinked a few times. Mr. Horsley? What are you doing in there? Mr. Horsley was shaking like a jackhammer. That guard spooked me. I ran down here and guess what? The mummy case was wide open and empty. So I hid inside, he said. The bumpy mummy must be alive. I knew I saw it yesterday, said Alexander. Why you did, said Mr. Horsley. Yes. But wait, said Alexander. I thought the mummy only came alive if someone stole the ruby scorpion. And I just saw the scorpion upstairs. It's safe and protected by lasers. Lasers schmacers. Mr. Horsley shouted. The mummy is definitely out there because it's not in here. Case closed. Slam. Mr. Horsley shut the mummy case. Alexander thought about what Mr. Horsley had said. He zipped to the exit, cutting through the swirling fog. Chapter 11, Don't Let Your Guard Down. Alexander sprinted up the steps. And into the lobby. His dad and Mr. Plunkett were laying out the sleeping bags. Rip and Nicky saw Alexander. They ran over. Salamander, said Nicky. Where did you go? You totally missed the gift shop, said Rip, holding a toy gopher. Check it out! A Stermont Stella bobblehead. Alexander grabbed his friend's shoulders. Guys, he said, I don't care about the gift shop. Listen to me, I was right. The bumpy mummy is alive. Rip and Nicky looked at each other. The mummy is not in its case. Mr. Horsley is down there right now, said Alexander. Ask him. Rip, Nicky, and the bobblehead nodded. It's bumpy mummy time, students, shouted Mr. Plunkett. Gather around to hear about Stermont's most famous mummy. Then we'll head downstairs to the mummy's chamber. Alexander, Rip, and Nicky joined the rest of their class. Some people say the bumpy mummy was an old circus dummy created to sell tickets, said Mr. Plunkett. Others say it was a nearsighted cowboy who sat on a cactus and had to be covered in bandages. Or even worse, a wart-covered toad person. Alexander's dad munched a handful of popcorn. So scary, he whispered. And, continued Mr. Plunkett, the bumpy mummy will come back to life if dash. The ruby scorpion has been stolen. Everyone gasped. Miss Sargent stomped into the lobby, swinging her flashlight. Someone got past my lasers, said the guard. She shined her light in Mr. Plunkett's eyes. I've been working here for years with zero funny business. But on the night your class arrives, our greatest treasure goes missing. Miss Sargent swept her light across the students' faces. You toddlers stay put while I search the museum. If so much as one toe leaves a sleeping bag, I'll lock you up. Her footsteps echoed across the stone floor as she marched away. Whoa, whispered Nicky. She's so dash awesome, said Rip. Alexander grabbed Rip's elbow. Look! He pointed up to the balcony. A grayish-white figure, covered in strange little bumps, stood at the railing. It was staring at Alexander. Chapter 12, Tick-Tock. The mummy locked eyes with Alexander. Then it turned and ran. It's running, said Alexander. I bet it's got the ruby. Follow that mummy, whispered Nicky. Are you nuts? Said Rip. Miss Sargent is super tough. Let her catch the thief. She can stop regular thieves, but only we can stop monster thieves. We're the SSMP, said Alexander. Okay, said Rip. Hooray for us and stuff. We'll need to be extra sneaky, said Nicky. If that guard sees us, she'll lock us up. Come on, said Alexander. He hurried to the balcony steps. Rip and Nicky followed. PJs are great for sneaking around, whispered Nicky. My slippers are ninja quiet. They crept up to the second floor. No sign of the mummy, said Nicky. It must be hiding, said Alexander. Keep looking. They searched a suit of armor, a wigwam, a triceratops skeleton, a fake volcano, and even a stagecoach. The mummy must have gotten away, said Rip. But how? Asked Alexander. We were dash. Shoo, said Nicky. Someone's coming. A beam of light danced through the darkness, throwing long shadows across the floor. Stay where you are, thief, shouted a voice. And no funny business. It's Miss Sargent, whispered Alexander. Run. They scrambled to keep out of the light. The three friends ducked down near an odd wooden door shaped like an acorn. Let's hide in there, said Nicky. She pushed on the door. It wouldn't budge. I've got this, said Rip. He rolled up his sleeves and leaned into the door. Gruff, he grunted. It's stuck. And it's making a weird noise. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I know that sound, said Alexander. Rip. Nicky. Duck. Huh? Said Rip. It's not a duck, said Nicky. It's a cuckoo. She jerked Rip away from the door. A spine-shaking chime rang out like a thunderclap. The acorn door popped open. And a giant mechanical bird sprung out. Grab that cuckoo, Alexander said. The three of them hugged the cuckoo. It wobbled a bit and then yanked them through the doorway. A second later, Miss Sargent's light flashed across the closed acorn door. Alexander, Nicky, and Rip tumbled into a dark room. They could hear loud gears whirring all around them. Where are we? Asked Alexander. Nicky, use your see-in-the-dark powers, said Rip. We are inside the world's second largest cuckoo clock, she whispered. And we're not alone. Chapter 13, Hickory Dickory Bop. Alexander's eyes slowly adjusted to the pale green light inside the clock. He saw gears, cogs, chains, and levers everywhere. And right in front of his nose, the bumpy mummy. Ack! Alexander jumped back. But the mummy just stood there. Or rather, leaned there. The mummy's not moving, said Nicky. She stepped up and poked its chest. A cloud of dust poofed up. It's so old and dirty, said Alexander. But the mummy we saw looked shiny and clean. And alive, said Rip. This one's just leaning against the old cart. Alexander stepped closer to the cart. It was piled high with junk. A glint of gold caught his eye. Hey, he said. My dad's mirror. And my skates, said Nicky. And my mom's trumpet, said Rip. And there's Horsley's dustpan. All of the stolen stuff is here. Alexander reached out for the Reflecto 900, but stopped. It had been taped to the cart. He looked at the other objects. They were all stuck to the cart. This cart looks like a machine, he said. A machine made from shiny stuff. But what's it do? Crickle, crickle. IT helps me steal the shiniest treasure ever, shouted a squeaky voice from high in the clockworks. A lumpy figure swung down on a chain. That's the mummy we saw on the balcony, said Nicky. And look! It's missing a hand, yelled Alexander. This bigger, scarier, moving mummy didn't walk stiffly like a mummy from an old movie. It glided along, making crinkly noises with each step. Crickle, crickle. It sounds like that mummy's wearing a diaper, said Rip. Pop, pop. The mummy's face twisted into an angry scowl. What? I am not wearing a diaper, it said. And I'm not really a mummy. The monster drifted into the light. It was wrapped in some kind of shiny material, covered with little plastic circles. A bubble wrap monster, said Alexander. I'm a bubble wrap warrior, boomed the monster. And I am ready to rumble. Chapter 14, Bubble Trouble. Alexander, Rip, and Nicky backed away from the crinkling, snapping, one-handed bubble wrap warrior. Alexander shouted over the grinding clock gears. So you sent us the striped boxes and stole our stuff? Yes, said the bubble wrap warrior. You humans are so annoying. You use bubble wrap to protect your shiny treasures. But then, when you no longer need us, you pop us. That hurts, you know? I did it all for payback. The monster's voice grew louder as it bounced closer to the three friends. Instead of protecting your shiniest treasures, I stole them, said the bubble wrap warrior. First I mailed my little helping hands to every house in town dash. The bubble wrap inside the striped boxes, said Nicky. Exactly, said the monster. But things like skates and trumpets weren't valuable enough. I needed bigger, shinier treasure. Then I heard your teacher talking about the ruby scorpion. So I built an awesome laser bouncing machine from your junk. But why are you pretending to be the bumpy mummy? Asked Rip. To blend in, said the bubble wrap warrior. It's easy to hide in a museum when you look like a mummy. I kept lookout while my helping hand popped off to steal the Sturmont's greatest treasure. The bubble wrap warrior raised its handless arm toward the shadows above. Just then, the bubble wrap hand dropped down from the gears. It was clutching the ruby scorpion. It scampered up the bubble wrap warrior's leg and snapped itself to the end of the monster's arm. At last, I am complete, said the warrior. Now that I have the ruby, there's just one thing left for me to wrap up. The monster puffed itself up. Then it lunged at Alexander. Chapter 15, A Tight Squeeze. Oof! The bubble wrap warrior barreled into Alexander, trapping him in a bear hug. Rip and Nicky pulled at the monster. It laughed. Let's go for a spin, shall we? I think my true form will blow you away. The bubble wrap warrior tossed Alexander aside. It set the ruby scorpion down on a big wooden pine cone. The monster unraveled itself into one long noodle made of hundreds of sheets of bubble wrap. Then it began spinning around. It spun faster and faster, rising in the air like a giant tornado. A giant twisting, snapping tornado made entirely of bubble wrap. Hush! The three friends' hair started blowing. Nikki shouted something. But Alexander couldn't hear her over the rush of wind. The bubble wrap warrior spun even faster. Clock gears wobbled. Chains rattled. Alexander could barely stand against the strong wind. He saw Nikki clinging to a ladder. Rip crouched behind a cog. Alexander grabbed the closest thing, the tail feathers of the giant cuckoo. He held on tight. Flomp! 8 long arms shot out of the tornado. Watch out! This monster's going into octopus mode. Rip shouted. A bubbly arm stretched across the room and grabbed Rip. Gotcha, said the bubble wrap warrior. Another arm reached for Nikki. She scooted up the ladder and out of reach. Third arm snaked back to Alexander, wrapping around his leg. He hugged the cuckoo tighter. Then 2 more arms shot out and snap. Broke the wooden bird off its branch. "Aack," yelled Alexander. The monster grinned as it grabbed Rip and Alexander. Let's see how you guys like getting popped. Chapter 16, Pop Till You Drop. The bubble wrap warrior squeezed Rip and Alexander until their eyes bulged. Drop my friends, bubble brain, yelled Nikki. She sat on a platform near the clock's face, dangling her legs over the edge. She stuck out her arm, jiggling something red and shiny over the grinding gears. The ruby scorpion, said Alexander. Warrior, if you don't put my friends down, she said, I'll toss this into the gears. You wouldn't dare ruin Sturmont's shiniest treasure, growled the monster. It squeezed the boys tighter. Sure I would, said Nikki. She tossed the red shiny scorpion into the clock's gears. Crunch! Shiny red pebbles tinkled down through the gears. "No!" the bubble wrap warrior screamed. The monster dropped the boys and reached for the gears. Pop pop! One of its arms got twisted in a cog. Alexander rolled to his feet. He was standing near the broken cuckoo. Squawk! The monster let out an angry battle squeak. It raised its puffy fists high, ready to smash. Guys, quick! Alexander shouted. Over here! Rip and Nikki ran over. Together, the 3 friends lifted the cuckoo. Then they pointed it at the monster's head. Hey, Bubbles, said Alexander. Watch the birdie! He pulled a latch near the cuckoo's spring. Boing! The bird delivered a cuckoo punch right on the monster's nose. The monster fell backward. The rest of its long arms became tangled in the clockwork gears. Pop! 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 It sounded like the 4th of July as the bubble wrap warrior was pressed between the gears, building up to one final clock-rocking boom. Nikki, I can't believe you destroyed the ruby scorpion, said Alexander. What? No way, said Nikki. That was a paperweight I bought in the gift shop. She pulled the real ruby scorpion from her pocket. Click, click, click whir. The clock's gears spat out a flat, clear sheet of plastic. Looks like every last bubble's been popped, said Nikki. So, what now? Asked Rip. Miss Sargent will lock us up if she sees us with the ruby scorpion. Said Alexander. Let's prop the clock door open and leave it here for her to find. Along with all the other missing stuff, said Nikki. The friends snuck out of the clock. They went down to the basement to tell Mr. Horsley the coast was clear. Then they crept up to the lobby and climbed into their sleeping bags. Toddlers, wake up! Miss Sargent came running into the lobby. I found the ruby scorpion. And a bunch of other junk. Miss Sargent dumped the stolen items on the floor. The students and Mr. Plunkett cheered. They jumped up to grab their missing skates, trumpets, and shiny doodads. Dad, said Alexander. Look! He handed his dad the Reflecto 900. Woohoo! Cried his dad. Then he leaped up and did another front porch dance. Ha ha, said Nicky. What a great field trip. You mean, what a great first day of summer vacation, said Rip. Alexander gave Rip and Nicky a high 30. 2 high 15s in a row. Then, by the glow of the world's second largest cuckoo clock, he added another monster to the notebook. Bubble Wrap Warrior. Walking, twisting, fighting, punching pile of bubble wrap. Habitat, boxes, moving trucks, loading docks. PIP pop. A bubble wrap warrior would lose in a fight with a porcupine. Behavior, bubble wrap warriors like to steal treasure. Fun fact. These monsters are clever. They can turn a pile of shiny junk into a laser-blocking machine. Beware! Bubble wrap warriors can twist themselves into many shapes. Mummy, tornado, octopus, crawling hand. Warning! If you find a sheet of bubble wrap, pop every bubble. Just to be safe.